knowledge of science into the political discussion. And I mean, I have miraculously, partly because President Trump retweeted me the other day, not retweeted me, but quoted me in one of his tweets. When I said that this climate crisis thing is not just fake news, it's fake science. And I actually think I coined fake science. So he did that, and he just, it's a great tweet. I mean, it got me 30,000 followers in 2 days. And now I have 77,000 followers. For a Canadian who's talking about environmental issues, right? It's not like I own a TV station or have a big show on Hollywood, so those guys get the hundreds of thousands, but a lot of times they're talking about their hairdos and stuff, you know? But this has been a really good evening for me. I mean, I came here knowing why I was coming here, because I want to find out about this. And I know that there's leadership going on here, and there's a grassroots movement happening. So I'm really interested in it. But now, after I've seen what you are saying and what you're doing and how you've said you're going to quit Paris, this is the key. Anything short of that doesn't do the job. And that's what Mr. Trump realized too. Anything short of that means you're still with all these policies that pander to this idea that we're doing something bad by putting CO2 into the atmosphere. When, as I have tried to show you, and briefly, I have a big presentation on this, it's on the internet too. Excuse me. Email me. My website, ecosense.me, is easy to find. Email me if you want to talk to me and question me about facts and get my papers. I have papers on the benefits of CO2 to the future of life on Earth. I have papers on why ocean acidification is a fabrication. That explains it right through in detail, that you can't take me an hour to do just that one thing. So I want to share my understanding with you. My hypothesis that we indeed are restoring a balance to the carbon cycle by putting CO2 into the atmosphere on purpose almost now, because we know we're doing it. At first we didn't know we were doing it, but now we know we're doing it, and they're saying we're evil for doing it. I say we're the salvation of life, not its destruction. This hypothesis has not been refuted, and I made my first lecture on this in October 2015 in London at the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, sponsored by the Global Warming Policy Foundation, of which the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sir Nigel Lawson, is the chairman. So it's not as if it's like, you know, in a Starbucks. I was talking to real people here, and it's been scattered far and wide, and nobody has refuted it. They just ignore it. I know it's true that this is good what we're doing. We don't want to put bad poison in the atmosphere, of course, but for them to say that carbon dioxide is poison, pollution, carbon, it's not carbon. That's like calling water hydrogen. Or why don't we call carbon dioxide oxygen? So I want to do anything I can to support what you're doing. Because this argument that you're splitting the right, there's no other choice. It's not as if politics, like thinking in general, evolves with time. And sometimes it's time to do something that makes a change. And how can you do that without doing what you're doing is the only thing you can do?
Yes.
Yes. It's nothing else you can do.
That's right.
And if it comes to pass that you end up in some coalition, or that things turn out some other way, who knows? You can't predict this. But you can't not do it. Thank you.
And I know that usually scientists, they're not with politicians. And being here on the stage today, I really appreciate that. And it's a big commitment for you. And we want to thank you for that, Patrick. And that's an act of courage as a scientist to be with a politician. My commitment to you is I won't change. You in a week from now, in a month from now, in a year from now, I'll be the same about that. So I won't change, and all our platform is based on things that I believe and we believe. So you can sleep very well that what you did tonight, I'll be the same guy in 10 years from now, because that's the truth, and you convinced me on that. I'm doing that because of you, and I want to thank you very much. And let's take some questions from you guys and ladies, and we can have a 10-minute discussion. But thank you again, Patrick.
Where's the mic?
Okay. What we're going to do, okay.
We'll share this one.
So we're going to take this microphone, we're going to put it over here on this mic stand, and those that have questions can kind of line up behind the mic and ask your questions of Patrick Moore and Maxime Bernier, and I'm sure we're all going to be gaining.
Yes, we'll do that for 10 minutes because it's a little bit late, and so be quick, ask your questions, and we'll try to have a short answer also.
Average height. Well, I'll try to be quick with this.
Is this where we try to...
As I said before,
Good luck. I've been in a lot of
Hello?
situations where you just can't control the time, you know. It's Friday night anyway.
Dr. Moore,
Hello.
paging Dr. Moore. As I said before, my name's Doug Bebb. I'm the PPC candidate for West Vancouver Sunshine Coast Sea to Sky. I have a bit of a science background as a mechanical engineer. I've always been skeptical of climate change. And when I decided to run, I thought I would try and educate myself slightly on the matter and began to read the IPCC materials. The most recent publication they have is an attempt to provide policy prescriptions to policymakers to mitigate extreme weather. Now we know we've gone from global warming, climate change, to extreme weather. And I can't remember the name of that publication, but nowhere could I find in there any definitive connection between global warming, man-made or otherwise, and extreme weather events. Does this connection exist, or am I looking in the wrong place?
No, the connection does not exist. As you say, it went from global warming during the 90s when there was a warming period. Like the 60s and the 70s were cold. There was a cooling period that happened there. And I remember as a young person seeing a lot of snow on the ground for a long time, even on Vancouver Island, which is usually green in the winter. And then we would have, in the 90s, we had periods like of 6-8 years where there wasn't even any snow on the West Coast. So this is climate change. It's cyclical and it happens. But as far as extreme weather events go, then, you know, they went from global warming and they renamed it climate change. So now they could say nearly anything that changed, droughts, floods, cold, hot, was part of climate change. Well, in the beginning, the idea was that it was about CO2, and that was really just about warming, because it's a greenhouse gas. So they suddenly shifted the whole paradigm into now it's about anything that happens to the climate. But then if you said to them, well, geez, that was a really cold winter last year, I thought it was supposed to be warming, they'd say, that's just weather. That's not climate. Don't get weather confused with climate. Now, it's totally about weather. The fingerprints of climate change are on that hurricane. It's like they have a dusting powder, like, you know, inspector, whoever it is, going out there and looking for fingerprints on the hurricane. like it's even a really bad metaphor. But they use it to make people think that the fingerprints of climate change are on the hurricane. And so there's all this language comes in, just keeps creeping in, new language just keeps creeping in. So no, there is no increase in extreme weather. Some years there's more extreme weather than other years, but if you look, and the person to look to for this is Roger Pielke Jr. He's in Boulder, Colorado. Pielke is P-I-E-L-K-E, Jr. His dad is also a scientist. And he has all these charts, I showed you 4 of them, about extreme weather here in the presentation, that show no clear trend and sometimes downward trend, because as the world warms, which little bit it has so far, it warms inadvertently towards the poles. The tropical regions, even between huge swings in global temperature, which have occurred in the past but are not occurring now, the tropical regions stay almost the same. We evolved in the tropics. Humans are a tropical species. We came out of Africa, from tropical, equatorial Africa. That's what we're evolved to be in. And if it was 10 degrees warmer globally back when we started evolving, we wouldn't be here because it would be too hot in the tropics if it was like worldwide. The tropics stay relatively stable, and the closer you get to the North Pole and the South Pole, that's where the change occurs, heating and cooling. So for example, Canada's tropical islands, even up till 5 million years ago, which is a blink in geological time, were subtropical forests. The remains of the trees are still there, with giant camels roaming in them. It's all on the internet. Just look for giant camels roaming in subtropical forests on Canada's Arctic islands. It's an easy Google, and there you'll get the picture. It's right there in visuals. So, no, in this interglacial period, which is only 10,000 years old, and that's about how long they usually last. This is getting complicated, but I'm just going to go back to 50 million years ago. 15 million years after the dinosaur extinction. The Earth was hot everywhere. We are now at the tail end of a 50 million year cooling period that has come from the Eocene thermal maximum. It's all in graphs. I didn't bore you with all that tonight. But all in graphs, this is the end of a 50 million year cooling period. We are now in the Pleistocene Ice Age, which began 2.5 million years ago in the northern hemisphere. It started earlier in the Antarctic because there's more ocean down there and more land up here. So that is why. But up here it started 2.5 million years ago. For the first 1.5 million years, the glacial cycles were 40,000 years long. Since 1 million years ago, they changed to 100,000 years long. It's called the Pleistocene conundrum. We don't know why that happened, but we do know that it has to do with the Milankovitch cycles. Look up Milankovitch cycles in Wikipedia and see how we know why the glacial cycles of the Ice Age, called the Pleistocene, have been dominated by those Milankovitch cycles of the Earth's orbit and the Earth's tilt. It's all there. This is nothing, what's happening now. The changes in the Earth's climate that have happened in the past were so much more massive. They occurred over long periods. But what's happening now is nothing. This is not climate change if you really want to define climate change as some serious change in the climate. This interglacial period, called the Holocene, is about the 40th interglacial period in the Pleistocene Ice Age. Up and down, up and down, up and down. Glaciers come, glaciers go, glaciers come, glaciers go. In 100,000 year and before that 40,000 year cycles. It's been going on for 2.5 million years. This interglacial period is divided into 2 sections. The first 5,000 years and this last 5,000 years. The first 5,000 years is called the Holocene climate optimum, where the Sahara Desert was green from top to bottom and east to west. And goat herders lived out there and wrote things on rocks. There were villages. They have names. It's on a map. You can read about it. They all, at 5,000 years ago, things started to change, started to cool off. The Sahara became dry. People moved into the Nile Valley. That's where the Egyptian Empire began, about that time, because everybody had to move in. This period of the Holocene is called the Neoglacial by geologists and people who are looking at the history of the Earth. Neoglacial means new glacial.
Dr. Moore?
That's because the glaciers are advancing now, over time. 300 years ago was the coldest period in the 10,000 years of the entire Holocene. It's called the Little Ice Age. This is the modern warm period, coming out of the Little Ice Age. The last time the River Thames froze over was in 1814. Before that, it had frozen over pretty much once a decade for 300 years. That's the Little Ice Age. We didn't cause the Thames River to stop freezing over in 1814. It's the sun. Sorry to bother you.
So,
It's the sun.
thank you,
It's the
Mr.
sun, and
Bernier.
we are now going into what a lot of people think is a grand solar minimum, which means the sun is cooling down and has less sunspots, no sunspots almost, for a long time now, a few years. And this could be a 30 or 40 year cooling period coming up. As I say though, my problem is, and it's galling to me, is people who can predict the future seem smarter than I am. Because I don't admit that I don't pretend that I can predict the future. Because the crystal ball is a mythical object. And computer models are not crystal balls anyways. So we can't predict the future. But we can try, carefully, maybe for the next few years. And this might be, we might be going into a cooling period. I almost hope we are.
Could we get some more questions, please? I think a lot of us can agree that climate change is fake news, and I think maybe it's time to move on. I've just got 3 quick comments. Thank you, Mr. Bernier and Dr. Moore. My name is Curtis Stone. I'm an organic farmer here in Kelowna. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an international entrepreneur. I do a lot of work in the U.S. I was part of the left, and I have been born into, I grew up in the New Democratic Party. My mother was a card-carrying NDP. I basically was surrounded by communists my entire life. And when I started making money, I started to go, wait a second, you want how much? And I would like to say one thing to all of you, especially those of you who are candidates, is you need to learn the ideological weapons of the left. And I would urge you to read the book Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. You need to understand the tactics that they use, not so that we can be hypocrites and use it against them, but so that we can understand their tactics. A lot of it is actually illustrated in what Dr. Moore says. The tactics of climate change and this fake science and fake news are tactics that they use. Also, listen to a man from Russia named Yuri Bezmenov, who defected from the KGB, and he illustrated exactly how these communist tactics are used to subvert people. And it's to cause instability. This is what's happening worldwide. This is why populism is growing, is because people are recognizing this. So I wanted to say that. Another thing, I think I would love it if the people in the PPC would get behind the basic idea of we need to reduce the power of the state. One example, I'm an entrepreneur. The CRA had the power to go into my bank account this summer without any notice and empty my bank account. They took every single dollar in my bank account. No notice in the mail, no phone call, no nothing. It took me 8 weeks to get it back. The government has way too much power. If we could unite on that idea, I think we could win over a lot of liberals. And lastly, I'm going to wrap it up, thank you. And then lastly, I think we're going to get a conservative minority, possibly. Max, would you be willing to work with the Conservatives to unravel the ideological insanity of the Liberals? Bill M18, Bill C16. Can I hear it from you to say that we might work with the Conservatives to undo these things, because if we play politics, we're going to be at a deadlock.
Our position is clear on these
Thank you.
on these bills. We're against that, and so for sure we'll support a liberal or a conservative government that want to get rid of it. Yes, the goal is to be sure that people who believe in our ideas and want to our support, they want it. If Andrew Scheer wants our support, they will have to support our policies. We won't do any compromise on our policies. So if they want the support of the PPC, they will have to agree with some of our most important policies, and we'll do that. Yeah, so can you be quick on your questions? Yeah, because the time is running.
You bet. Quick one. I was just wondering, how did this get this far? Why did this get so ingrained? It's like the religion of climate change. Who's behind it? What money's behind it? Or how did this brainwashing happen over the last 10 so years?
Vast amounts of money. But the simplest way to explain it quickly, with time being short, is that I don't call it a conspiracy so much as it is a powerful convergence of interests among elites who have become the stupidest people in society in many ways. That's why I say Bill Gates is the only smart billionaire. This convergence of elites includes the green movement for fundraising with sensationalism, the media for being the echo chamber of the sensationalism and perpetuating it, the political left for promising families they will save their children from dire conditions and total death and destruction. And Hollywood is in there too. And then the politicians I mentioned, the scientists who take this money every year from taxpayers and keep saying, you have to give me more because we have to keep studying this on and on. On one hand, they say the science is settled, so why don't they just shut up? Instead, they keep taking money as if they need to do more work. Why would you need to do more work if the science was settled? And then there are the green business, all the subsidies, whether it's Tesla or wind farms or solar farms or biofuels, you name it. The market is being completely distorted by these subsidies, and they're causing energy prices to go up for no benefit except this so-called benefit of reducing CO2 emissions. And if you look at Germany, you will see they've spent hundreds of billions of dollars and they're doing nothing to reduce their CO2 emissions because they need the fossil fuel plants to back up the renewables when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And on top of that, they're going to shut down their nuclear plants, which is providing 15% of their power reliably right now. So they're going to have to put in more fossil fuels because wind can't back up a nuclear plant being shut down. So the whole thing is all these people who are making money, making fame and glory from this fairy tale, and we've got to break it up. It's like breaking up a cartel. It's like breaking up a mafia. Got to break it up. And the biggest criminals in it all are these people who meet at Davos in Switzerland every year. All these billionaires flying in their private jets to IPCC meetings and Davos meetings, and they're all just a bunch of hypocrites because they're not doing what they say we should do. And anybody who does what they say I should, who doesn't do what they say I should do, I'm not listening to them. And this is what you guys represent, to a certain extent here, is not listening to these idiots anymore.
Yeah, Dr. Moore, I'm just wondering if you could offer as kind of something to take away for particularly parents of younger children in school, elementary school particularly. How do they push back against, in this case, and I'll just use as an example, and I'll read a tweet here and then I'll tell you who tweeted it if you don't already know. Plastic pollution has increased tenfold since 1980. It's choking our oceans, lakes, and rivers and threatening our wildlife. If we don't act now, by 2050, plastics in our oceans could weigh more than fish. I don't know about you, but that thought of that horrifies me. That's Catherine McKenna, the Liberal MP and Minister of Climate Change.
Yeah, she's a piece of work.
Yeah, so, yeah.
She is one of the least educated, most ignorant people that could get to that level of power. She just drives me crazy. I don't like to say climate Barbie, but I did.
But this is the individual, the type of thing she's saying that is modeled in schools for young children to believe.
I'm well aware of that.
Parents need some tools to push back against that, some common sense tools, so whatever you could offer.
Fight like hell.